In the final desperate hours, in the cold, sterile confines of Dachau concentration camp,
show the scars of
they brought
miserable
her out.
existence under Nazi prison rule.
Her name was Nur
American doctors
Inayat
examine the
Khan,
victims.
a princess by birth, a musician and writer by trade, a spy by necessity. She had been betrayed, captured, interrogated, and beaten for months, yet she had revealed nothing. Not her
Some have
real name,
gangrenous wounds.
not the secrets of her network, not a single piece of information that could endanger the cause she served. As she was forced to her knees, facing the men who were about
Others
to end
suffer
her
from
life,
fever, tuberculosis,
she spoke a
typhus, and
single,
additional
final
communicable
word.
diseases.
A
All
word
existed
that was
under
not a
appalling
plea,
conditions in
but a
vermin-infested
declaration.
quarters, and with
A
little or
word that
nothing to
echoed
eat.
the very
As
reason
soon as
she
our
was
troops
there,
arrived,
the
arrangements were
reason
made to
thousands
remove
like
these
her
people
fought
from the
and
miserable
died in the
surroundings.
shadows. That word was liberté, freedom. We think we know the story of the World War II spy. We picture a suave man in a tuxedo, a femme fatale with a hidden pistol, an intricate world of clever gadgets, daring escapes, and last-minute triumphs. It's a narrative shaped by fiction, a clean, thrilling game of wits played by invincible heroes. But the truth is infinitely more complex
Under
and far
supervision of
more
the American
brutal.
Red Cross, the
The
stricken
real
inmates are
history of
removed to a
wartime
hospital which
espionage
belonged
is
to the
not a
German
story
Air
of
Force.
glamorous super
Nazis who
agents.
formerly
It is the
maltreated
story
them
of ordinary
are forced
people,
to help look after the
professors, housewives, journalists, and poets, who were thrust into extraordinary circumstances, armed not with exploding pens, but with raw courage and a willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice. The central, haunting truth of the secret war, a truth we will uncover today,
The
is
staff
this.
of German nurses is also forced
The
to
most
attend the
effective
victims.
weapon in an agent's arsenal was not their training or their technology, but their humanity. And in the cold calculus of war, that humanity was also their greatest vulnerability. This is
Women
the
are
story
able
of
to
the
smile for
spies
the
of the
first time
Second
in
World
years.
War, not as they are imagined in novels, but as they truly were. Flawed, frightened, brilliant, and tragically mortal. This is the autopsy of a myth. As the 1930s drew to a close, the world was holding its breath. The polite fictions of diplomacy were crumbling, and the shadows of war were stretching across Europe. In this tense new era, information became the world's most lethal currency. Nations that had for years relied on gentlemen diplomats and military attachés to gather intelligence were suddenly faced with an existential threat that required a new, more ruthless kind of warfare. This was the birth of the modern intelligence apparatus, a global chess match where the players were hidden and the board was the entire world. On one side were the Allies, a collection of nations slowly waking up to the scale of the impending catastrophe. The British, with their long tradition of cloak-and-dagger statecraft, were arguably the most prepared. Their intelligence services, MI5 and MI6, were storied institutions, but they were about to be tested as never before. In New York City, far from the battlefields of Europe, a quiet Canadian industrialist named William Stevenson, known by the code name Intrepid, set up an organization called the British Security Coordination. From a nondescript office in Rockefeller Center, Stevenson built a sprawling network that blurred the lines between espionage, propaganda, and political subterfuge, effectively waging a covert war on American soil to nudge the neutral nation towards the Allied cause. The Americans, by contrast, were newcomers to this shadowy game. Insulated by two oceans and a powerful isolationist sentiment, the United States had no centralized foreign intelligence
Others among
agency.
the original total of 350
The idea of a
inmates were shot
peacetime
down by
spy
German
network
elite guards
was
as they
seen as
dashed from the
profoundly
prison huts to
un-American,
celebrate the arrival
a
of American
tool of
troops
decadent
outside the
European
city.
empires.
The atrocity story is
It would
told
take
by
the
few
shock
who
of
managed
Pearl
to
Harbor
survive.
to fully
They
awaken
relate
the
how
sleeping
12
giant,
SS troopers
leading
and
to the
Gestapo
creation
agents
of the
lured
Office of
220
Strategic
starving
Services,
prisoners into
the
a big wooden
OSS.
building at this
Its
camp,
leader was General
sprayed the
William
structure with
Wild
an
Bill
inflammable
Donovan,
liquid, and
a
then applied the
charismatic
torch.
and visionary lawyer
Machine guns
who
set up
believed
at
in a new
various vantage
kind of
points
total
mowed
warfare,
down many victims
one
who
that
ran from the
integrated
burning
intelligence
building.
gathering,
Some
sabotage,
miraculously
and
escaped the
psychological
hail of bullets,
operations.
but were electrocuted by the
The
live wires
OSS
of
was a
fence, which
quintessentially
the final
American
hurdle for those
creation,
fleeing the flames.
ambitious, chaotic, and filled with a brash, can-do spirit, recruiting everyone from Ivy League academics to Hollywood directors and mafia-connected operatives. Opposing them was the Axis intelligence machine, a reflection of the totalitarian regimes it served. The Germans possessed a fearsome reputation for efficiency
The dead are
and
viewed by Russian
ruthlessness.
women liberated from slave
Their
labor.
military intelligence agency, the Abwehr, was headed by Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, a shrewd and enigmatic figure. The
At
Abwehr
Koenig,
had
Germany,
agents
a
spread
concentration
across the
camp was
globe,
overrun by the 6th
a web
Armored
of
Division
spies
containing
and
mainly
informants that
Hungarians,
seemed to
who were
possess
people
an
of
almost
wealth and
supernatural ability to anticipate Allied moves. Yet, beneath this veneer of monolithic power lay a fatal weakness. Canaris, a man of the old Prussian aristocracy, was secretly horrified by the brutality of the Nazi regime he served. In one of history's greatest ironies, the head of German military intelligence was actively working to undermine Hitler's war effort, a deadly game of internal dissent that would ultimately cost him his life. But the Abwehr was not the only player. Competing with it, and eventually consuming it, were the intelligence arms of the SS, Heinrich Himmler's fanatical security organization. The Gestapo, the secret state police, operated with a terrifying blend of meticulous bureaucracy and unrestrained brutality. Their methods were not subtle. They relied on a vast network of informers, systematic torture, and the ever-present threat of the concentration camp. For any Allied agent operating in occupied Europe, the Gestapo was the ultimate antagonist, the faceless embodiment of fear. And then there were the Soviets. The Soviet Union played a complex, shifting role in the war, and its intelligence agencies, the NKVD and the GRU, were masters of infiltration and deception. They operated with a deep-seated paranoia and a long-term strategic vision, viewing both the Axis and the Western allies as potential adversaries. Their greatest triumphs came from ideological spies, dedicated communists who embedded themselves deep within the governments of their enemies. A prime example was Richard Sorge, a German journalist in Tokyo who was, in reality, one of the most effective Soviet spies in history. His intelligence, particularly his confirmation that Japan would not attack the Soviet Union from the east, allowed Stalin to transfer critical divisions to the west, a move that proved decisive in the brutal Battle of Moscow. This, then, was the landscape. A world of competing intelligence empires, each vying for the vital information that could tip the scales of a global conflict. It was a world where loyalty was a tradable commodity, where a stray word could doom an army, and where the most important battles were fought not on the open field, but in the silent, hidden spaces between the lines. The stage was set for a new kind of war, and it would require a new kind of warrior. But first, it would require new tools. The secret war was a technological arms race, a relentless contest of innovation where the future of nations could hinge on a single breakthrough in a quiet laboratory.
Former inmates demonstrate how they were
The popular
tortured by the
imagination,
Nazis.
fueled by decades of spy fiction, fills this world with fantastical gadgets, lipstick pistols, shoe phones, and camera pens. While some of these
American
creations did
congressmen
exist
invited
in
to view the
primitive
atrocities
forms,
were told by General
the
Eisenhower,
reality of wartime
"Nothing is covered up.
espionage technology
We have
was both
nothing to
more
conceal.
mundane
The
and
barbarous
infinitely
treatment these
more
people received in
consequential.
the German
It was a world of
concentration camps
codes,
is almost unbelievable.
chemicals,
I
and
want you
clever
to see for yourselves
concealment.
and be the
At the heart of
spokesman
this
for the United
technological
States.
struggle was the battle for communications. Secrecy was paramount. How could an agent in occupied France send vital information about
The
German
general
troop
and his party
movements back
next
to
see the
London
crude woodland
without being
crematory,
detected?
actually a grill made of
The
railway
answer
tracks.
lay in the
Here, the
invisible
bodies of
realm
victims
of
were
radio
cremated.
waves.
Charred remains of
Agents
several
were
inmates
equipped
still
with
lay heaped atop the
suitcase-sized
grill.
wireless radio sets. These were heavy, cumbersome devices that required immense skill to operate, and even more courage. Transmitting a message created a radio signal that German direction-finding teams could triangulate, turning every broadcast into a deadly race against time. An agent had to set up their
Another
antenna,
group to visit
tap
the
out their
Ordnance camp
message
is
in Morse
composed of
code
local
as quickly as
townspeople,
possible,
including prominent
and then
Nazi
pack up
party
and
members.
disappear
They'll
before
be
the
taken on a
Gestapo's
forced
black
tour of the
Citroen
campsite by
screeched to
Colonel
a halt
Hayden Sears,
outside.
commander
To
of the
protect
4th
these
Armored Division's
messages,
Combat Command
encryption
A,
was
which
essential.
captured our group.
The Germans placed their faith in a marvel of engineering called the Enigma machine. Looking like a fortified typewriter, the Enigma used a series of rotating
The
wheels
German medical
and a
major
plug
is
board
compelled to
to
accompany the
scramble a
townspeople.
message into a seemingly random string of letters. With over 150 quintillion possible settings, which were changed daily, the Germans believed Enigma was unbreakable.
Colonel Sears
It was their
stands by
single
as the
greatest
Nazis are informed
technological
that they must
advantage,
see all the horrors
allowing
of the
their
case.
armies, Air Force, and Navy, especially their U-boat wolf packs, to communicate with perfect security. They believed they were speaking in a language only they could understand.
First, the
They were
visitors
wrong.
view some 30 freshly killed
While
bodies
agents in
lying
the field
courtyard
relied
of
on
the camp
radios,
where they'd been shot
their
on the
handlers
evening
developed
preceding the
ingenious
entry of
methods
American
for
tanks.
smuggling physical items. Spies needed maps, money, and tools. To get these past watchful eyes, Allied quartermasters became masters of concealment.
These two are
chess
identified as
piece
slave
could be
labor
hollowed
bosses
out
who
to hold a
maltreated,
tiny
tortured, and
compass.
killed their workers.
A tube of toothpaste could contain a secret message written on microfilm. A seemingly innocuous shaving brush could
Next,
hide a
to the
radio
woodshed,
crystal.
which the Nazis are reluctant to enter.
Most famously,
Colonel Sears demands
maps
that
of
they get a
escape
close-up
routes
look
were
at the
printed
most
on silk.
gruesome of sights.
Unlike paper, silk wouldn't rustle or dissolve in water, and could be easily sewn into the lining of a jacket or hidden in the heel of a boot. For a downed airman or an agent on the run, a silk map was a lifeline. The tools of sabotage were equally clever and far more deadly. The SOE's research division, nicknamed the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, developed a range of discrete explosives.
The labor bosses enter.
There was the limpet mine, a magnetic bomb that could be attached to the hull of a ship by a diver. There were explosive devices disguised as lumps of coal, designed to be shoveled into the tender of a locomotive, turning a vital piece of transport into a twisted wreck.
According
Perhaps
to reports,
most
the local
infamous
Nazis
was the
continued their
exploding
tour of the
rat,
camp without apparent
a
emotion.
hollowed-out rat
All
carcass
denied
filled
knowledge
with
of what had
plastic
taken place
explosive.
at Ordroof.
The idea was that it would be thrown into a boiler room's coal pile, and when shoveled into the furnace,
They are taken to the
it would
crematory
detonate
2
with
miles outside the
devastating
camp,
effect.
where the list
The
of the
plan was
atrocities
never
is read
fully
for all to
implemented,
hear.
as the Germans
4,000
discovered the
Ordroof
first
victims are
shipment.
said to include Poles,
But the sheer
Czechs,
creativity
Russians,
of the
Belgians,
weapon
Frenchmen,
sent
German
them on a
Jews, and
wild
German
goose
political
chase,
prisoners.
forcing them to exhibit the captured rats in military academies across the country, a psychological victory in itself. Disguise and deception were also critical. Forgery departments worked
The day before
tirelessly
these
to
Nazis
create
visited the
perfect
camp,
reproductions
the
of
Burgermeister of
identity
Ordroof was
cards,
forced to
travel
view the horrors.
permits,
He
and
and
ration
his wife
books.
were later
The
found dead in their
bureaucratic
home.
shackles of occupied Europe. A single flawed stamp or an incorrect paper type could mean a death sentence. And for the spies themselves, their greatest tool was often their own mind. They were trained in the art of disguise, of adopting a new personality so completely that it became second nature. This was the world of human cunning, where the ability to lie with a steady gaze was more valuable than any piece of technology. These were the instruments of the invisible war, a world of silent radios, unbreakable codes, and hidden daggers. It was a world that seemed to be dominated by technology and cleverness. But the greatest weapon, the one that would truly change the course of the war, was not a machine or a gadget. It was an idea, an order given by one man that would unleash a new, chaotic, and utterly human form of warfare upon the continent. In the summer of 1940, Britain stood alone. The armies of Nazi Germany had swept across Europe with terrifying speed. France had fallen. The British army had been miraculously evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk, but it had left its heavy equipment behind. An invasion seemed imminent. In this darkest of hours, Prime Minister Winston Churchill knew that conventional warfare was not enough. Britain could not yet fight the German army on the continent, but it could harass it, undermine it, and terrorize it. On July 19, 1940, Churchill penned a memo to his Minister of Economic Warfare, Hugh Dalton. The memo was short, but its directive was revolutionary. He called for the creation of a new organization, one that would operate outside the traditional rules of war. Its purpose, in his own immortal words, was to set Europe ablaze. This was the birth of the Special Operations Executive, the SOE. It was the single most important turning point in the secret war. The creation of the SOE was a radical departure from the established order of espionage. The traditional intelligence agencies like MI6 were focused on gathering information. Their agents were observers, trained to collect secrets and report back. The SOE's mission was entirely different. Its agents were not meant to be observers. They were meant to be catalysts. Their job was to infiltrate occupied territory, link up with local resistance movements, and arm them, train them, and lead them in acts of sabotage and guerrilla warfare. They were tasked with blowing up bridges, derailing trains, assassinating key officials,
at the graveyard attached
and
to the
in short,
institution, bodies are exhumed
making
for
life
autopsy.
for the occupying German
20,000 are buried
forces
here.
a living hell.
15,000 who died in a
This
lethal
new
gas
mission
chamber were
required a
cremated,
completely
and their
new
ashes
kind
interred.
of agent. The SOE didn't recruit from the traditional pool of diplomats and career officers. They looked for people with specific, often unorthodox, skills. They needed linguists who could pass as natives, radio operators who could master the complex art of Morse code, and tough, resourceful individuals who could survive and operate alone, deep behind enemy
Death
lines.
books found hidden in the wine
This led
cellar of
them
the
to
Hadamar
recruit from an
Institution revealed
astonishingly
part of the
diverse
story
range
of the
of
mass
backgrounds.
killings. The bulky
They
volumes
brought in
contained thousands of death
academics,
certificates.
criminals,
Profession
journalists,
unknown,
actors,
nationality unknown,
and
was
most
written after each
controversially,
name.
women. The decision to train and deploy female agents was groundbreaking. In the patriarchal world of the 1940s military, it was almost unthinkable. But the SOE was a pragmatic organization. They recognized that women possessed a
Corpses are
unique
lined up
advantage.
pending the arrival of WCIT
They were less likely to be
officers.
suspected by German patrols. They could move more freely, and their presence was often a calming, stabilizing influence on fractious resistance groups. So, they began to recruit them. Women like Noor Inayat Khan, a gentle writer of children's stories, and Virginia
Major
Hall,
Volker performs the autopsy.
a determined
A
American
detailed
with
listing
a
is made of
prosthetic
all
leg.
clinical data.
Recruits were sent to a series of isolated country estates and rugged training grounds scattered across Britain and even as far as Canada, at the secretive Camp X. Here, they were stripped of their civilian identities and forged into weapons. The training was brutal and comprehensive. They
Interrogating the
learned
institution
silent
head.
killing techniques,
Dr. Wallman,
the delicate
taller
art
man, was
of
the
placing
top Nazi in charge
explosives,
of the place.
and how to
The other
fire
man
a
entering the
vast
room is
array
Carl
of
Village,
British,
chief male
American,
nurse.
and
He
German
admits to killing
weapons.
inmates with overdoses of morphine.
They were taught map reading,
Testimony of other witnesses
cryptography,
substantiated the fact
and the
that morphine was
soul-crushing
issued at the
discipline
institution
of
without attempt at
parachuting
making
into
a
the
record.
dark from a
As many as
low-flying
17 at a
aircraft.
time died from the morphine
But the most
injection.
important skills they
Investigating
learned
officers were
were
told that
mental.
the Nazis never
They were
bothered
taught
to
how to
determine
lie,
whether a victim may have
how to
survived the
withstand
overdose.
interrogation,
Instead,
and how to
all were
create a
hustled off to
convincing
the
cover
graveyard
story.
and buried in piles
a
of
new
20,
identity
24.
complete with a detailed, fabricated life history that they had to inhabit completely. They were also given a final, grim piece of equipment, the L pill, a cyanide capsule hidden in a button or a pen, to be used as a last resort to avoid
Prisoners are
capture
removed
and
to
torture.
await trial.
The formation of the
Hadamar
SOE
judge told
represented the moment the
investigators that when
secret
the
war
10,000th
ceased
victim died,
to be a
the
passive game
institution
of
heads and
information
Nazi
gathering
officials staged a
and became
celebration.
an active, violent, and deeply personal struggle. It was the decision to weaponize ordinary citizens, to turn them into insurgents and saboteurs. This was not a war that would be fought by armies in uniform, but by individuals hidden in plain sight. It was a strategy born of desperation, a gamble that would have profound consequences. For some, it would lead to acts of heroism that would change the course of history. For many others, it was the first step on a one-way journey into darkness. The clandestine world of espionage is, by its nature, a theater of illusion. It is a place where truth is a weapon, identity is a costume, and reality itself can be sculpted and manipulated. During the Second World War, this art of deception reached its zenith. The Allies orchestrated grand, continent-spanning stratagems designed not just to gather information, but to actively mislead the enemy on a colossal scale. This was the peak of the myth. The idea of the master spy as a puppeteer, pulling the strings of the entire German high command. And no one embodied this myth more perfectly than a quirky, unassuming Spanish chicken farmer named Juan Pujol Garcia. Pujol was a man who despised fanaticism of all kinds, having been repulsed by both sides in the Spanish Civil War. When World War II broke out, he decided he wanted to contribute to the good of humanity by helping the British. He approached the British embassy in Madrid, offering his services as a spy. They politely turned him away. Undeterred, Pujol went to the German embassy and offered to spy for them. They eagerly accepted. He was given a code name, a crash course in spycraft, and a bottle of invisible ink, and sent to London. The only problem was, Pujol never went to London. He went to Lisbon, and from the confines of his hotel room, began to invent an entirely fictitious spy network in Britain. Using a tourist guide to the UK, public train timetables, and his own fertile imagination, he crafted elaborate reports for his German handlers. He invented a network of 27 sub-agents, a Dutch airline steward, a Welsh nationalist, a civil servant, each with their own personality and access to different kinds of information. His reports were a brilliant mixture of genuine, publicly available information and carefully crafted falsehoods. The Germans were completely convinced. They believed they had a master spy at the heart of the British war effort. Finally, in 1942, the British, who had been intercepting his messages, realized the value of this eccentric amateur. They brought him to Britain and gave him the code name Garbo, after the famous actress, because they considered him the greatest actor in the world. With the full backing of MI5, Garbo's fictitious network exploded in scale and influence. His crowning achievement was his role in Operation Fortitude, the massive deception campaign designed to conceal the true location of the D-Day landings. Through his network, Garbo fed the Germans a torrent of information, suggesting that the main Allied invasion would come at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point in the English Channel, and that the landings in Normandy were merely a diversion. His reports were so convincing, so detailed, that even after the Normandy landings began on June 6, 1944, Hitler and his generals kept their powerful 15th Army in the Pas de Calais for weeks, waiting for a main invasion that would never come. That phantom army, held in place by the lies of a single man, was the critical difference between success and failure on the beaches of Normandy. For his efforts, Juan Pujol Garcia was awarded the Iron Cross by the Germans and an MBE by the British, perhaps the only man in history to be decorated by both sides in the same war. Garbo was not the only master of deception. There was Eddie Chapman, a charismatic British safecracker who was in jail on the Channel Islands when the Germans invaded. Recruited by the Abwehr, he was trained as a saboteur and parachuted into Britain. He immediately turned himself into the authorities and became a double agent for MI5, codenamed Zigzag. His most famous mission involved faking the destruction of the de Havilland aircraft factory. After a German
None of
bombing
our
raid,
medical battalions worked 2
MI5
days
created
and
a
nights
convincing
finding
illusion
wounds and giving
of a direct
medication.
hit
But
with
for
scattered
advanced cases
debris
of
and
starvation
fake
and
damage.
tuberculosis, there were
Chapman
often no
reported his
cures.
success
The
back to his
survivors are shown
German
being
handlers,
evacuated for
who
treatment
were
in
so
Allied
pleased they
hospitals.
awarded him a substantial sum of money and hailed him as a hero. While these individual masters of deception played their parts, a quieter, more profound act of illusion was unfolding in the secluded halls of Bletchley Park. Here, a team of brilliant mathematicians and linguists, led by the eccentric genius Alan Turing, waged a relentless war against the German Enigma
The
code,
victims are mainly
using a
Poles and
combination of
Russians, with
inspired
considerable
guesswork,
numbers of French and other
meticulous
nationalities also
analysis,
included in the camp
and the
roster.
power of the bomb, an electromechanical device designed by Turing. They managed to do the impossible. They consistently broke the supposedly unbreakable German codes. This intelligence, codenamed Ultra, was the single greatest secret of the war. It gave Allied commanders an almost godlike view of the battlefield. They knew the location of U-boat wolf packs in the Atlantic, the strength of German divisions in North Africa, and the plans for German offensives on the Eastern Front. The ripple effect was immense.
Burgermeister of Nordhausen
Ultra
ordered
is
to
credited
provide
with shortening the
600
war
German male
by at least 2
civilians
years
who will inter
and
the
saving
2,500
countless
unburied
lives.
bodies at the camp.
In the Pacific, a similar breakthrough occurred. American cryptographers, led by the brilliant Joseph
A
Rochefort,
priest administered
managed
last
to crack
rites
the
for dead
Japanese
while
naval
the corpses
code,
are being carried to the hillside for
JN-25.
burial.
This intelligence allowed the U.S. Navy to anticipate the Japanese attack on Midway Island in June 1942. Admiral Nimitz, armed with this foreknowledge, was able to set a perfect trap, sinking 4 Japanese
Then the actual
aircraft
burial
carriers in a
common
single day.
graves of the 2,500 Nordhausen
The Battle of
victims.
Midway was the turning point of the Pacific War, a catastrophic defeat from which the Japanese Navy never fully recovered. It was a victory won not by sailors, but by codebreakers thousands of miles away. The stories of Garbo, Zigzag, and the codebreakers represent the apex of the spy myth. They are tales of pure intellectual triumph, where cleverness and deception defeated brute force. They created a ripple effect that changed the strategic course of the war. They proved that the invisible war was real and that its victories were as decisive as any battle. But this myth, as compelling as it is, conceals a much darker truth. For every agent who successfully manipulated the enemy, for every decoded message that saved a convoy, there were countless others for whom the game of shadows was not a thrilling adventure, but a terrifying one-way descent into oblivion. The autopsy of the myth begins where these stories of triumph end. The glamorous myth of the master spy, a figure who outwits the enemy at every turn, is a comforting fiction. The reality for an agent in the field was a life of constant, gnawing fear. It was a world where a slip of the tongue, a suspicious concierge, or the betrayal of a trusted colleague could lead instantly to a Gestapo interrogation room. Survival depended on a combination of meticulous training, iron-willed discipline, and sheer, dumb luck. And for many, their luck eventually ran out. This is the truth behind the myth, a forensic examination of the human cost of the secret war. We begin with Virginia Hall, the woman the Gestapo called the most dangerous of all Allied spies. An American socialite who had lost her leg in a hunting accident, Hall was an unlikely candidate for espionage, but her determination was ferocious. Working for the SOE in Vichy, France, she became a master organizer, creating escape lines for downed airmen and coordinating resistance activities. Her prosthetic leg, which she nicknamed Cuthbert, was both a hindrance and a source of her legend. She was the limping lady, a phantom who moved through the shadows, always one step ahead of the Gestapo, led by the notoriously ruthless Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, who was obsessed with her capture. When the Germans occupied all of France in late 1942, Hall's position became untenable. She was forced to make a harrowing escape over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain in the dead of winter. The journey was agonizing. At one point, her prosthetic leg caused her so much pain that she signaled her handlers in London that Cuthbert is giving me trouble. Fearing her leg was a person who might compromise her, London replied with the chillingly pragmatic message, "If Cuthbert is troublesome, have him eliminated." Hall, of course, could not eliminate her own leg. She persevered, dragging herself through the snow and ice to freedom. Her story is a testament to incredible resilience, but it also reveals the brutal reality. She was successful, but she was also hunted, isolated, and in constant, mortal danger. Nancy Wake, an Australian journalist living in France, was another force of nature. Known to the Germans as the White Mouse for her ability to elude capture, Wake was a key figure in the French resistance. She was not a subtle operative. Her methods were direct and often violent. She personally led attacks on German installations, killed an SS sentry with her bare hands, and once cycled over 300 miles through enemy territory to re-establish contact with London after her radio operator was forced to destroy his set. Her exploits were legendary, but they came at a terrible price. The Gestapo captured and tortured her husband to death in an attempt to learn her whereabouts. He never broke. Nancy Wake survived the war, but she carried the scars of that loss for the rest of her life. Hall and Wake were survivors. They represent the exception. The rule was often far grimmer. The story of the Prosper Network is a chilling case study in how quickly things could go wrong. Organized by SOE agent Francis Suttle, Prosper was one of the largest and most effective resistance circuits in France. For a time, it was a model of success, carrying out acts of sabotage that severely hampered the German war effort. But in 1943, the network was catastrophically compromised. A single betrayal, possibly by a captured agent who broke under torture, created a domino effect. The Gestapo, armed with a key piece of information, began to roll up the network with terrifying speed and efficiency. They arrested Suttle, his radio operator, and then, one by one, dozens of other agents and hundreds of local French resistance members. The entire organization, built over months of painstaking and dangerous work, collapsed in a matter of weeks. Francis Suttle and many of his key lieutenants were sent to concentration camps, where they were executed. The fall of the Prosper Network was a devastating blow to the SOE in France, a stark reminder that no matter how successful, every agent was only one mistake, one betrayal, away from total disaster. The ripple effect of this failure was profound, silencing a huge portion of the resistance in northern France for months. And this brings us back to Noor Inayat Khan, the woman who died with the word liberté on her lips. Her story is perhaps the most poignant and tragic in the annals of the SOE, a perfect encapsulation of the brutal collision between idealism and reality. Noor was a pacifist by nature, a Sufi who believed in non-violence. But her hatred of Nazi tyranny was stronger than her pacifist principles. She volunteered for the SOE, trained as a wireless operator, and was sent to Paris under the code name Madeleine. She arrived just as the Prosper Network was collapsing. The Gestapo was on a rampage, arresting agents left and right. Within a week of her arrival, she was the only SOE radio operator left in Paris. Her commanders in London, recognizing the extreme danger, ordered her to return home. She refused. She knew that without her, the remaining resistance fighters in Paris would be cut off, silenced. For months, she operated alone, constantly on the move, changing her location, her appearance, her call signs, becoming the single most important communications link between London and the heart of occupied France. But her time was running out. She was eventually betrayed, likely by the sister of a fellow agent who sold her out for money. The Gestapo captured her. During her interrogation at their headquarters on Avenue Foch, she fought like a tiger, refusing to say a word. She attempted to escape twice. Deemed too dangerous and uncooperative, she was shipped to Germany and imprisoned in Pforzheim prison, where she was kept in chains, in solitary confinement, for 10 months. She was starved, beaten, and tortured, but she never talked. In September 1944, she was transferred to Dachau concentration camp, along with 3 other female SOE agents. The following morning, they were taken out and executed. The autopsy is clear. The myth of the invincible spy dies in places like Dachau. Noor Inayat Khan's greatest weapon was not a gadget, but her indomitable spirit. Her ultimate fate reveals the true cost of the secret war. It was a war fought and won and lost, not by fictional superheroes, but by real, vulnerable, and extraordinarily courageous human beings whose sacrifices have been too often eclipsed by the very myths they inspired. The final gunshot in Dachau, the successful deception at Normandy, the desperate escape over the Pyrenees, these are not disconnected events. They are interwoven threads in the same complex tapestry. When we zoom out from the individual stories of triumph and tragedy, a larger, more profound picture of the secret war emerges. It was a war of contradictions, a struggle where the greatest successes were built upon the foundation of unthinkable risks, and where the line between heroism and sacrifice was often impossibly thin. The timeless lesson of World War II espionage is not about the brilliance of technology or the cleverness of deception. It is about the paradox of human nature in conflict, the very qualities that made these agents effective. Their empathy, their idealism, their ability to form bonds of trust with the people they were organizing were the same qualities that made them vulnerable. A spy operating in isolation is of limited use. A spy building a network, earning the trust of partisans, and living among the occupied population becomes a powerful force. But in doing so, they expose themselves. Every new recruit is a potential weak link. Every trusted friend is a potential betrayer. The success of Garbo was an anomaly, made possible by the fact that his entire network was a fiction, existing only in his mind. The tragedy of the Prosper network was the norm, where a real human network could be unraveled, link by human link. The legacy of this era is vast and continues to shape our world. The end of the war did not mean the end of the secret war. It simply marked the beginning of a new chapter. The wartime alliance between the West and the Soviet Union fractured almost immediately, giving way to the icy standoff of the Cold War. The intelligence agencies forged in the heat of global conflict were not disbanded. They were repurposed and expanded. In America, the OSS was dissolved, but its spirit and many of its personnel were reborn in 1947 with the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. In Britain, MI6 absorbed many of the SOE's operational functions, shifting its focus from Nazi Germany to the new adversary behind the Iron Curtain. The methodologies also evolved. The code-breaking achievements of Bletchley Park laid the groundwork for the digital age and the rise of signals intelligence agencies like the NSA. The ungentlemanly warfare of the SOE became the template for modern special forces operations and covert action. The Cold War became a global chessboard, with CIA and KGB officers maneuvering against each other in Berlin, Havana, and Saigon, using the same playbook of deception, subversion, and human intelligence that had been written during the Second World War. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is the human one. It is the memory of the individuals themselves. Virginia Hall, who proved that courage is not the absence of limitations, but the triumph over them. Juan Pujol Garcia, who showed that the most powerful weapon can be a well-told lie. And Noor Inayat Khan, who demonstrated that even in the face of certain death, the human spirit can remain unbroken. Their stories force us to confront the true nature of courage. It is not the absence of fear. It is feeling that fear, the cold knot in your stomach as you tap out a Morse code message, the spike of adrenaline when a patrol stops you on the street, and doing the job anyway. It is the quiet resolve of ordinary people who, when faced with an extraordinary evil, chose to fight back, knowing full well that their names would likely never be known, and their sacrifices might never be acknowledged. They were the invisible soldiers, the ghosts in the machine of the Second World War, and their echoes still resonate today, reminding us that history is not only shaped by the grand movements of armies and nations, but by the secret, solitary courage of the few. The stories of these spies, both the celebrated and the forgotten, are more than just historical footnotes. They are a vital part of our collective memory. If this exploration of the true cost of the secret war has resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the untold stories of history. And we want to hear from you. Which spy story do you find most compelling? Was the high risk of using civilian agents justified by the results? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation and ensure that these invisible heroes are never truly forgotten. Thank you for watching.